Hi everyone!
Hello!
Welcome back to our series on the history of perfume. The last chapter, we'll link the previous ones below if you haven't seen them. We were talking about how perfume really was used a lot in the Middle Ages to ward off disease, and as something that people thought would stop them from getting things like the plague. So moving on from that, in this chapter, we're calling it the Age of Enlightenment.
Yes.
But we're covering like 1700s through to 1900.
Like a 200, actually quite an interesting 200-year period.
Yeah. So this was really when plague and other diseases had been kind of eradicated. Not completely.
There weren't the same kind
but definitely
of mass
Europe.
Deaths from plague as there were in the 1600s.
So I think that saw a change in the taste of people's fragrance, because whereas people were wearing really strong, potent fragrances, you know, often like round their necks and the pomanders and things, now they felt like they wanted to smell just clean and fresh.
Yeah, well, and also hygiene became fashionable again. It was. We talked last time about people being scared to bathe because water might be the carrier of the plague, but actually they realised that bathing was all right.
Yes.
And if you think about it logically, if your body is clean, then you can smell more subtle fragrances on it.
That's true.
As this period progressed, we see a real trend towards much more of a lighter, fresher, cleaner, more delicate,
citrusy and water kind of smell.
Well, and of course this was the period of eau de cologne.
Exactly. Yes. So eau de cologne, I don't know if you guys know the story behind this. There's kind of various variations of the story.
There's some rumours about who did or didn't really invent the first one.
Eau de cologne.
But the one that's widely thought about is the Giovanni Maria Farina story.
Yeah. So that was in, was it 1732? In Cologne, obviously, which is why it's got its name. But why did it smell like it does?
Well, because Jean-Marie Farina was Italian. So he was an Italian coming from, I mean, you imagine all the beautiful landscapes of Tuscany or Umbria with their citrus groves and their cypress trees and lots of aromatics and fresh. So he kind of, well, the story goes, he moved to Cologne in Germany, got homesick for Italy and made this fragrance that he called eau de cologne, which actually had lots of ingredients like the citrus, the bergamot, the lemon that reminded him of his home in Italy. So it smelled really fresh and uplifting and I mean lovely. We know we like colognes. It's one of the most widely loved.
I mean, to this day they often smell like the Mediterranean, don't they? Most kind of colognes. So it still stood that kind of test of time, that type of fragrance. So that was happening over in Germany.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in France.
Yeah.
We talked a bit last time about the Palace of Versailles, and we did mention, you know, the Perfume's court, which of course was the court of King Louis XV. He reigned for a lot of the 1700s, but and we kind of know that in that time it was the height of fashion to have your secret perfume recipe made for you.
Yes.
Perfume was a status symbol, if you like. But what we're really interested in this period is Marie Antoinette's influence.
Yes.
Because she was married in the late 1700s to Louis XVI of France, and the lavish, evocative lifestyle that they led in the court. It was really very highly perfumed, and she was very seductive, so she used lots of musk and civet and animalic ingredients to really seduce.
She had her own perfumer, didn't she?
She did.
So she would literally take him all around with her, and he just worked solely on making fragrances for her.
Exactly. There's actually a book that we've got up here, which is about Farragon, who was her perfumer, and it's quite amazing when you kind of read into the history and some of the smells. I mean, he made a perfume for her, and it was like lots of jasmine and tuberose and lily and very exotic flowers, and you can imagine it kind of really being highly scented at the time. But of course, that life of excess and the lavishness didn't last, because then what happened at the end of the 1700s?
Dear.
They all got their heads chopped off. Someone told me the other day, I love this story, that Marie Antoinette, when she was fleeing the French Revolution to try and avoid the guillotine, someone recognised her. She was travelling incognito, and someone recognised her as royalty because of her smell. Because only the royal and the rich would be able to afford such lavish perfume.
Oh gosh.
Talk about give yourself away.
Yeah. So she was big in this period, but after her and after the French Revolution, during the French Revolution, we had Napoleon.
Yes. And the Napoleonic years, sort of late 1700s to 18, so really the first half of the 1800s, that was still very perfumed.
He loved fragrance, didn't he?
He loved eau de cologne.
Exactly. And I mean, there's a story that he had a standing order with a perfume house for 50 bottles a month of eau de cologne, and they said
I use a lot of perfume.
But he literally bathed in it, and I think he even drunk it.
Oh really?
I'm sure I read something about that, because it's an alcohol base.
Yeah, well, why not?
And I mean, I think they were all away with the fairies for most of the time, but he literally it was coming out of every pore, because he was crazy. Obsessed with everyone wearing perfume all the time. And he obviously famously was married to Josephine.
Yes, very famous love story in history. She loved perfume.
Yeah, exactly. So she was another. So I'm sure together they were an amazingly perfumed couple. Yeah. But she liked things a little different to his taste. So she was
flowers.
She was more into floral.
Violets particularly.
Yeah.
Again, this sort of trend for more delicate, the lighter side of fragrance, with him being a lover of citrus fragrances like the colognes, her loving delicate flowers like the violet or rose petals. They both hated musk, apparently.
Oh, yes.
And the story goes that there was a time, I mean, I think it all came good in the end, but there was a time where he either had an affair or left her, and she decided to stuff musk in every corner of their rooms in their palace. So, and apparently even today, those
you
rooms
can still smell it in Versailles,
because he hated it and she wanted to get him back. But when she died, it's rumoured that he had violets planted on her grave, which is beautiful.
Oh, that's lovely.
Really
so they made it up in the end, even after the musk.
Yeah, I guess they did. Yeah. Talking of violets, Victorians in England at that time, so Victoria, of course, reigned for much of the 19th century in England, and violets were really prevalent because of her taste as
She was very, I don't know, obviously how much you know about Queen Victoria, but she was very famous for saying, like, I am not amused.
Yeah,
she was like very
moralistically
stern
correct.
And kind of sober looking, wasn't she? She wasn't really the glam of Marie Antoinette.
No.
So she liked things that were kind of
subtle.
understated and, kind of feminine but not sexy in any way. So she was really a lover of things like lavender water, rose water, anything that was kind of delicate. And
of course in that time, you start to get houses that we recognise today, like Floris, for example, very old house that was a specialist in lavender water. Creed, another one. So Creed, she issued a royal warrant.
That's why they have on all their packagings the royal warrant.
So they used to make perfumes from Queen Victoria. In fact, they're one of the oldest perfume houses, but they actually started as a tailor's business back in the 1700s. But then, of course, in the 1800s, they were working for the royalty. And I mean, many other houses that came sort of to life, if you like. Places like Houbigant, who actually were back in the 1700s, they became very, very famous later on for a fragrance called Fougère Royale, and Fougère as a fragrance family has stood the test of time. It's something that's incredibly popular. We'll have to do a video on the Fougère family.
Yes. So, of course, one of the notes that's in Fougère Royale that was revolutionary of this period was coumarin.
Yes.
So coumarin is a kind of synthetic. It's called synthetic, but it does come from the tonka bean originally.
Yes, it's an isolate.
It's so that they fractionate it off to get an isolate, which is coumarin, which smells kind of like a dry hay smell.
Yeah.
And it has come to be quite a modern smell.
Amazing, actually, how the invention of synthetics really changed.
Yeah. we were able to create things such as Guerlain's fragrance, Jiki, which has the note of vanillin in it, which is another one of these kind of synthetic isolates.
It must have been hugely exciting for these perfumers at the time. You know, these houses like Guerlain in the 1800s, so their perfumers suddenly had at their fingertips many more ingredients,
more smells,
and what it did is that the synthetics enabled the perfume to be more stable. You know, sometimes when we're using natural ingredients, you are kind of at the mercy of
You never know what you're going to get. No. And of course, the invention of the spray in 1870 brought fragrance up to how we see it today in terms of how we would use it.
Exactly. So a real big period of change, I think, in the 1800s. I mean, there was a lot going on with the Industrial Revolution anyway. So by the time we've got to 1900, where this chapter ends, we see perfume as a completely different product than it was in Marie Antoinette's or Louis XV's time at the beginning of the 1700s. So next time for our chapter 4, we will start to have a look at the 20th century.
Yes.
I don't think we should do it all at once though.
No, maybe we'll break it down because there'll be some fragrances that we can actually show you and we can actually smell that are still around today. So that'll hopefully be interesting for you. Thank you for watching. If you've watched all of our history chapters so far, if you haven't, then have a catch up below. And
thank you for your comments as well. We really appreciate that.
It's so lovely to hear your thoughts on our videos. So we're glad you're enjoying them. See you all soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.